Fire Emblem loves dragons. Even if the entire game revolves around human warfare, dragons somehow always find their way into the story. Hell, the average Fire Emblem game has more dragons in it than the entire Dragon Quest series, and it's named after them. But whereas Dragon Quest has consistently featured the same dragon enemies, Fire Emblem constantly switches it up. And I don't mean dragon characters, I mean the actual species of dragon. The list of dragon species that have appeared in more than one world is very short. The vast majority of dragons are exclusive to one game or games if they share a continent. So I figured, how about we take a look at all those dragons we've seen over the generations, starting with by far the most common one, Wyverns. Every single world in Fire Emblem history features Wyverns. They are as common as humans from their perspective. The only game that left them out was Gaiden, or Shadows of Valentia, but since Valentia is in flying distance from Arcania, it seems more likely Alma and Celica just never encounter any, rather than they flat out don't exist. In most games, Wyverns hold a place in society that is similar to other kinds of animals, like horses, being used for warfare after being domesticated. But the original lore, in Arcania at least, is that Wyverns were once sapient, but deteriorated over time to become the mindless, as far as you can call animals mindless, creatures we see today. Both wild wyverns and domesticated wyverns appear in the games, with quite a big difference between the two, which implies that the help and training of humans can cause wyverns to do all kinds of feats they wouldn't be able to do without. For example, trained wyverns follow commands, understand human speech, and have largely stopped using their fiery breath, which is actually one of their main forms of attacking in most games in which they appear as untamed monster enemies. I doubt I need to tell you much about how extremely good wyverns are from a gameplay perspective. If you haven't ever used a wyvern rider once, YouTube definitely recommended you the wrong video. Which is why I quickly want to make the jump to what I guess you could consider a subspecies of the wyvern, exclusively found in Nor. Not even the entirety of Fate's Land, just Nor. The Malik is exclusively seen in the Malik Knight class, which in and of itself is the advanced class of the wyvern rider. You may not have even realized this is supposed to be a unique animal, as it's not super blatant, but the class description does suggest this is a unique type of dragon, highlighting that they are evil dragons, supposedly different from the wyverns the unpromoted variant uses. Interestingly enough though, the Japanese flavor text makes this even more blatant, while also casting doubt that the Malik is supposed to be its own unique species. Here, the mount is referred to as a Mage dragon, albeit without capital letters. Mage dragons, with capital letters, hail from the two Arcania games, appearing as enemies in the form of Manaketes. If you are wondering by the way, Manaketes are not a type of dragon themselves, it's the collective name used for all kinds of dragons that can shift between human and dragon form. The kind of dragon doesn't matter, as long as you're a dragon in human form, you're a Manakete. Like these Mage dragons for example, which effectively function as the dragon equivalent of mages, like the name very slightly hints at. They have a high magic stat and high resistance as such, and ever since the remakes attack using Mage Breath, a variant of the traditional Fire Breath attack you're more likely to associate with dragons. Mage dragons return in riding in Fire Emblem Engage, as while we never really get to see it, Zephyia as well as Vale's unnamed mother are known to be Mage dragons. According to Zephyia, her kind is capable of making magical objects, which can I guess mean everything from creating powerful weapons to pulling a rabbit out of a hat. In Arcania, the Mage dragons have several brothers with different elemental types. The Ice dragons are also exclusive to the continent, only appearing in Mystery of the Emblem and its remake. Their design always reminds me a little of sauropod dinosaurs, although I'm not sure if that's really the intention behind it. The complete lack of wings really helps plant that image in my head. Anyway, these dragons live in the north of Arcania, where the climate is much colder, and in battle, Ice dragons are defined by their sturdiness, with high HP, defense and resistance. Just like Mage dragons have Mage Breath, Ice dragons have Ice Breath. What they also share is that they sort of reappear later in the form of a character, as both Ninian and Nils from the Blazing Blade are stated to be Ice dragons. Just like Zephyia, they do not appear in battle in this form though. Unlike Zephyia, Ninian does actually transform at one point, revealing that the Elebian variant of the Ice dragon really doesn't look too icy. It's just a green dragon, design-wise. It is noteworthy though that despite frequently appearing in Mystery, Ninian and Nils are the first Manakete Ice Dragons, as 0 of them appear in Arcania. The Blazing Blade and the Arcania games share one more dragon type, and that is the quintessential species, the Fire Dragon. You would think that name is a little redundant, seeing as breathing fire is a classic dragon move, but I suppose that with so many subspecies it can't hurt to be specific. This is one of the most common dragon types fought in Arcania, with Bantu standing out as a playable fire dragon. Some apparently also made their way underground, as Shadows of Valentia features a small number of fire dragons as enemies within Fabe's Labyrinth, which is located in Arcania, in case you're not aware. Due to this being a post-game area, these fire dragons are actually incredibly strong, way stronger than what Marv ever dealt with, so I guess living underground is a great way to build up muscle. It doesn't come close to the raw stat power of the Blazing Blades fire dragon though, which is of course its final boss and fought on its own, so in the end it's actually a bit of a pushover, ironically enough. By all accounts, this dragon really is nothing special. It's just the same kind of dragon Marv allegedly beat a whole bunch of. It's not a dragon leader, some kind of character, it doesn't even have a name. It is possible this boss fight was inspired by a cut fight from the Binding Blade. Data is left in the game that suggests enemy fire dragons were cut from the predecessor/sequel, and the fact that Jan, one of the last enemies fought in the Binding Blade, is a fire dragon suggests that he may at one point have been battleable in his dragon form rather than human form. This still isn't every type of dragon we encounter in Arcania, as we are yet to cover the big bad himself, Medeus. In Shadow Dragon, Medeus is an earth dragon, the last remaining of his kind. Although Mystery of the Emblem corrects this by also introducing regular earth dragons that are fought in ways similar to the other elemental species. According to the lore, earth dragons are the strongest dragon variant, ruling over the other elemental dragons, at least back when they were sapient. Their stats highlight this further, with both stellar attack and defense, and their main attack, Dark Breath, which halves your attack, shows how they are more than just another elemental variant. They are also immune to attacks from distance. Later in the Fire Emblem timeline, we would get to meet Loptus from Genealogy of the Holy War, who has never really fought in his original form, but it is stated to be an Earth Dragon, and in Awakening, Grima is stated to be a descendant of Earth Dragons, although he is not one himself. But before we get to Awakening, we're still not done with Medeus, as he is only an Earth Dragon in Shadow Dragon. In Mystery of the Emblem, he is, ironically enough, a Shadow Dragon. While he has always been referred to as a Shadow Dragon, he was never actually one until Garnev resurrected him a second time with the help of the Blood of the Maidens. The connections to his origins are still evident though, as he too has access to the Dark Breath that Earth Dragons also use. Now, back to Grima, who is another separate species known as a Fell Dragon, and in his home world of Arcania/Elise is implied to be the only one. What's interesting about this dragon species is that it isn't actually a natural being, it's man-made. Grima was created by the alchemist Forneus, as revealed in Shadows of Valentia, meaning that, as far as we know, fell dragons don't naturally exist and are instead a sort of Frankenstein-like creation. Which does draw questions about how Sombron, Veil, Nell, and Rafal could ever be fell dragons. Now, it is possible Forneus accidentally created something that, in other worlds, can exist naturally, which would explain Sombron, as while it isn't confirmed, it feels nearly impossible for him to be man-made. He has much more agency than Grima, he feels much more alive as a sentient being, if that makes sense. What the two do share is the ability to make the dead rise once more, with the Risen and Corrupted that we see in Awakening and Engage, which obviously draws comparisons to how Grima was created in the first place, once again leaving Sombron's origins as a bit of a mystery. Despite them both having very strong associations with dark magic and energy, Engage does also confirm fell dragons are not inherently evil, as both Veil and Alear are able to fight against their father. At the same time, the Vel's law confirms that fell dragons have a sort of natural aggression to them, resulting in many of Sombron's children killing each other. And of course, we cannot bring up Engage without talking about the Divine Dragon, a recurring type of dragon, so to speak, that appear in Engage, both Leap games as well as every game set in the Arcania world, which does also include Awakening, Shadows of Valentia, and Genealogy of the Holy War. Out of all dragon species, these feel least like an animal or even a species in general, and rather more like a dragonified version of a deity. While most games do feature dragon forms for their divine dragons, nearly all of them are Manichees and prefer a human form. Tiki, Goto, Zane, and Nagi from the Arcania games are divine dragons, but even among them there is a wide variety of powers. Tiki and Nagi are traditional Manichees. They transform into a white dragon with the help of a dragonstone. Zane, on the other hand, can just transform into whatever the hell he wants, which includes a dragon if he copies Tiki or Nagi. Goto ditched his Dragonstone long ago, so is now just a mage, albeit a very powerful one. Then we have Duma and Milla, who are both stated to be divine dragons, albeit only in the remakes, not the original Gaiden. Milla's dragon form is only really seen while sealed away, but Duma is full on fought while he is a dragon, albeit one that is referred to as a fell god. That may sound like a fell dragon, the same as Grima, but it most definitely isn't, as the Japanese names don't really line up. Instead, it appears the idea is more that Duma is a divine dragon, but with dark power flowing through him rather than light power, although that is not really confirmed. While Jugdral never shows us a physical divine dragon, we do know Naga is revered here as a sort of deity, just like in Arcania, and she, or he, as they are called in the Arcania games, is later shown in her human form in Awakening. Seeing as she is Tiki's mother, I would assume her dragon form looks identical to Tiki's. In Elyos, we are hit over the head with the fact Alir is a divine dragon, an artificial one mind you, but still. While we never see their dragon form, we do see what Lumera can turn into, revealing a white dragon that is certainly reminiscent of what we've seen before. In Alib, divine dragons are far from revered and instead served as a sort of neutral party during the Scouring, the fight between humans and dragonkind. Most of them disappeared, and as such, little is known about them by the general population, but the infant dragon Faye can join your army in the Binding Blade, and we encounter Idun, who was born a divine dragon, but was turned into an entire separate species by the other dragons. She is another artificial dragon as such, and this one listens to the name Demon Dragon, a one-of-a-kind mutation that is also capable of the aforementioned Dark Breath attack. However, despite clearly establishing a connection to Arcania's Earth and Shadow Dragon that way, the Japanese name of the class is actually the exact same as the Mage Dragon, making it kinda unclear whether this is supposed to be a reference to Arcania or not. If so, you'd think they keep it more consistent. Anyway, the whole point of a demon dragon's existence is to create more artificial dragons known as war dragons. All war dragons appear to be fire dragons, and according to the game's story, have no emotions or thoughts going through their head. All they know and want is war, and to fight humans. They're effectively just puppets. As such, calling it a species is maybe a bridge too far. That same thing also applies to the necro dragons that appear in Shadows of Valentia. These are the reanimated corpses of dragons, and as such, not a separate species that can ever exist without dark magic's meddling. The same applies for the Vafnir, a stronger variant of the necro dragon. They also appear in the Sacred Stones by the name of Draco Zombie, as Malva is turned into one by Leon. While Magval is as such not without his dragons, they only play a minor role here. Mur is a recruitable Manakite and a new incarnation of the Great Dragon, a background lore character from the game who aided humanity in the fight against the Demon King Fomortis the first time around. Based on Mur's dragon form design, we can deduce that this is probably another unique species of dragon, although its role is definitely reminiscent of the divine dragons of other worlds. But before we look at some more of those worlds, let's wrap up Valentia, cause there are two more dragons here to tackle. Even though white dragons were initially simply stronger necro dragons in Gaiden, Shadows of Valentia seems to indicate that they are actually a separate species, and most importantly, not undead. In the code of the game, they are listed alongside the fire dragons of Tab's Labyrinth rather than the necro dragons, implying they are not meant to be seen as undead enemies. That said, the description of the class still states that it's a reanimated dragon, so who knows at this point. Also listed in the same place in the code, and most definitely not undead, are the Dagons. These are aquatic dragons that live in the water surrounding Arcania and are encountered in Tab's Labyrinth, Seabound Shrine and the Dragon Shrine. They attack using water breath, fittingly, and might entirely be reference to the Sea Dragons, a cut enemy from Shadow Dragon and Mystery of the Emblem that may have been intended to be another elemental dragon that lived in water. We also know a Sea Dragon was meant to appear as a boss in Shadow Dragon by the name of Neptune. It would have attacked using tornadoes, and well-scrapped art and sprites depicted as a classic, almost Loch Ness-like sea monster, the actual sprite that was meant to be used in-game is a traditional red dragon. Alright, I think we've talked about the same group of games enough now, it's time to tackle one that hasn't featured even once in this video. The Dragon Laguz from Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. Obviously native to Tellius, these come in 3 color variants, red, white and black. Red dragons excel at physical stats, so they're bulky with high attack, while white dragons are the mage dragons of the Laguz. Since only one white dragon ever appears in the Tellius games, and it is Nasir of all people, the comparison to divine dragons is easy to make, but from what we can tell, there's nothing that makes it any more special or powerful than other Laguz. Arguably even more ironic is the fact that what is in lore the rarest dragon color, black, is actually the one with the most confirmed characters, 4 in total. They all hail from Radiant Dawn rather than Path of Radiance and have a major impact on the plot, although that has little to do with their species and more with their decisions as sentient human-likes. So let's make a jump to another world we have briefly talked about, the one from Fates. Maliks may be a debatable subspecies of Wyverns, but no one can deny the dragons that appear in the game's story. This world's answer to the divine dragons are the first dragons, godlike beings of which a maximum of 12 are known to exist. Hardly a thriving species as such. Among them are the Dusk and Dawn dragons that founded Norin Hoshido, the Rainbow Sage, as well as a Nankos, who was fought using the class and name Silent Dragon, so perhaps that was his moniker. When he turns Garon into a dragon, he is known as the Blight Dragon, while in Japanese he's basically called the Nor Dragon, as if this is a species that hails from that region. That said, the name is also incredibly similar to Shadow Dragon, as in Medea's form, not the game. Anyway, in true Fates fashion, it is a little hard to discern how powerful the first dragons actually are. On one hand, we know only a fraction of an Ankos is enough to undo Grima's work, and he can open portals to other worlds, just like his fellow fell dragon Sombron is capable of doing. However, it is made very clear that a Nankos cannot revive the dead, something those fell dragons can do, so it seems likely that at least a Nankos is more on equal terms with different strengths and weaknesses, rather than outright stronger than fell or divine dragons. As a half-blood, Corrin is not a full-fledged first dragon, and instead, their and Kana's deer-like dragon form is referred to as Feral Dragon. This is probably not a biological species though, more so the result of being only partly able to access their first dragon heritage. The game never fully explains this though. What is also never really explained is why Corrin has this half form, while Lilith has a different dragon altogether known as an astral dragon. Perhaps her mother wasn't a human like Makoto, but instead something different altogether. Who knows? Either way, dragons of this kind have access to pocket worlds and dimensions all over, which is how Lilith creates My Castle. As far as her design goes, calling this a dragon is really pushing it, let's be real. She's a fish. Not a sea monster, not a serpent, a fish. A fish that wears clothes and permanently holds a sort of orb thing. What can I say, I'm not a fan. It is worth pointing out though, she is always called a astral dragon, implying that this is very much a species, not some individual thing only Lilith is. And finally, we have the only dragons without a name, the Nabateans from Three Houses. It's kinda crazy to think about, huh? For all the world building and lore Folkland has, the species of dragon that Rhea, Sedith and the other saints are is never named, something Fates is very diligent in doing. Even Indak and Macule, who appear in-game in their monstrous forms, are referred to as the Lord of the Lake and Lord of the Desert in their classes, as well as Windcaller and Immovable within the lore, which are names similar to Rhea's Immaculate One. However, seeing as how they are so closely tied to the goddess Sophis, to the point they're even referred to as children of the goddess, does bring up very strong Divine Dragon vibes. Although design-wise, it feels hard to believe that say Indak and Seros are the same species when they look completely different. Like, yeah, Seros' dragon form has a strong resemblance to divine dragons, but Macule, not really. But hey, maybe I'm making this video a little too early, and Fortune's Weave will finally make some sense out of the Folkland dragon species. We'll just have to wait and see. What are your favorite dragons in Fire Emblem? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. If you really want to support me, you can now become a channel member to get all kinds of fun perks and help me keep bringing these videos to your doorstep every week. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.